I want to turn it over to my co-facilitator, Katelyn Wang, who is the Executive Director of L.I.G.H.T. And we're going to give space for everyone who's joining us today to share a little bit about who they are and what they do and how they're entering into this conversation. And then we will have space to gather for a larger conversation with all of our guests. So Katelyn, I want to turn it over to you.
Hi everyone, it's really lovely to be here. I'm super excited for the upcoming conversation. As Katie mentioned, I am the Executive Director of L.I.G.H.T, which stands for Lead, Inspire, Grow, Hope, and Transform. It's a youth-led grassroots organization based in the York region. We focus on the topics of youth empowerment, community building, empathy building, capacity training, and advocacy. Through this, our work entails 3 programs. So we have a fellowship program, which provides training in social justice topics and 21st century skills that looks like employable skills such as event planning, like communications, like formal letter writing, blog writing, like all sorts of like fun things, like even engaging individuals who have different opinions other than yourself. So that helps equip youth with the tools that they need to engage their community and become activists. Our events and programming team engages youth to design and implement their own initiatives to address gaps that they've identified in their community. And finally, our policy advocacy team works on research and advocacy on local issues. So for instance, they're working currently on a campaign for the Vote 16 project, as well as trying to get our local municipal government to read land acknowledgements before all of their meetings. Recently, in response to the pandemic, I also co-founded Young Ontarians United with Terrence D'Souza. This is a research project to amplify youth voice and hear about their lived experiences during the pandemic and any voice, give them an avenue to voice their concerns or their suggestions for the government. The idea was that there's a lot of policy being made for youth right now, and obviously a recovery strategy is going to be in plan afterwards, after the whole pandemic kind of concludes. So we wanted to ensure that youth participation and there was an ability for youth to participate in these decision-making processes. So during our research, it was important that we prioritized this youth participation, equity, and intersectionality. So in turn, we hope to develop a report with our findings and meet with stakeholders to discuss policy recommendations down the line. So that's a little bit about me. Thank you so much, everybody, for having me here. And with that, I would like to introduce the lovely Hayley Moody, who is a Provincial Program Manager at LGBT Youth Line.
Awesome. Thanks, folks, and thanks for having me. So my name is Hayley. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently on Saugeen territory in Gitchie-Mawikadong, or known as Owen Sound in English. Just a bit about myself. I'm mixed race Anishinaabe from the shores of Lake Huron and English, and I identify as queer and two-spirit. So a little bit about my work. I work at LGBT Youth Line as the manager of provincial programs. And so for folks who aren't familiar with LGBT Youth Line, I can give a bit of context of the work that we do. So we are a 2S LGBTQ+ youth-led organization, and our entire mandate is support 2S LGBTQ youth throughout the province of Ontario. So we are a provincial organization. We're very small, but a very mighty team. So I can share a bit about our main program. So folks usually know us for our peer support line. So we have 2S LGBTQ youth throughout the province can call, text, or instant message to chat with other 2S LGBTQ+ youth volunteers who are trained to support other youth from a peer perspective. So that's our main program. It's been in existence for 26 years now. We had our 25th anniversary last year. So that's kind of what we're known for. It's our biggest program and supports, thousands of youth throughout the province every year. And so a little bit about the provincial programs, which are the programs that I manage. So we have 2 currently. So the Provincial Youth Ambassador Project, which has had multiple iterations over the years, but it's just based on, 1-2-year grants that we can secure. And what PYAP is a volunteer program that builds community and leadership skills amongst 2S LGBTQ youth throughout the province. So there is a cohort happening right now, and what these folks are working on is just building different community programs to meet community needs for the most part. So for example, the youth have created some really amazing really amazing projects. So we have like a Black only youth group right now. We have a zine being created in the Brant region. We have a Northwest needs assessment. We have a Northeast affirmation project and a couple of other projects as well. So that's kind of what they're up to right now. And our second provincial program currently is Youth Organize, which actually just started. It's very similar to PYP, but it's a regional program. So this program is specifically based in Peel and Halton. And again, for 2S LGBTQ youth that are 29 and under. And we have our very first cohort of 16 youth working together to meet needs in their community. So right now we have 3 different pods, so little groups of those youth that are working together to create projects for this year. So our first pod is like a COVID response pod. The second one is an everything arts pods. And the third one is some type of like youth gathering. So the main difference between PYP and Youth Organize, I mean, one, PYP is provincial, Youth Organize is regional, but PYP is based on like 1-year funding that we've secured versus Youth Organize is for 3 years. So we're actually hoping to create like longer term projects and create relationships between the different cohorts throughout the 3 years, just to build community capacity in the region. Yeah, so that's a little bit about the work that I do and the work that LGBT Youthline does. And I'm excited to share more information as we move into this conversation.
That's great, Hayley. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh yeah, no, thank you so much. We're really excited that you could join us today. I'm going to turn it over to Jonathon Reed, who is a program manager at Next Gen Men.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jonathon. My pronouns are he and him. I'm the youth program manager for an organization called Next Gen Men, which is a leading organization in Canada on engaging and empowering boys and men on topics of gender. So typically what my work looks like is managing and facilitating school-based programs with mostly grade 7 and grade 8 boys on things like mental health, healthy relationships, and gender equality. And as you are going to find out, all of that is now online. And so we've had a lot of learning over the last 8 months, and I'm looking forward to sharing that. But I think I'll just leave it at that and let the next person go.
Awesome. I'd now like to invite Michelle McClure, who is the Executive Director of Ability Online, to introduce their work.
Thank you very much. So I am the executive director for a charity called Ability Online Support Network. We offer a monitored, secure online community, which we've been running for 30 years. So we started before technology was fully developed, and it was a bulletin board system, so very painful. Would take an hour to download a mail packet. But fast forward 30 years, and we now are providing an all-inclusive community for kids, teens, and young adults with any kind of disability or health challenge, mental health issues included as well. And they come to us because of social isolation, wanting to develop independence, social skills, supports that will contribute to a healthy lifestyle. And we're very excited because we've just launched a brand new, fully accessible, mobile-friendly platform. We've just started it for our young adult members at this point, and then we'll be rolling out kids and teens and parents and healthcare and education professionals in the new year. But our platform is now at the myability.ca URL. And the opportunities for engagement are profound in that we have in our intake, when people are registering, we ask them for their goals and interests so others can do a search and find individuals who share those same interests and goals. It allows us to intervene and help create new content on the sites. We have an extensive tips and techniques section with all kinds of information for physical health, mental health, social skills, developing independence, advocacy, and the members connect with one another through open forum discussions, through private messaging, and our chat nights, which are Monday nights between 7 and 9 p.m. And we're just thrilled with the partnerships now that we have with 10 colleges and universities that are bringing student interns into our platform to help facilitate the growth and development of our members. And I will leave it there and welcome any kind of questions or opportunities that people might have.
Great, thank you so much, Michelle. Everyone, if you wanna turn on your cameras and your microphone, I think we'll ease into the conversation. Um, Obviously, you're all working different population groups, different needs and challenges. So we're looking forward to exploring um, some of those challenges, some of those successes, practice strategies, and we really appreciate that you all took time out to join us today. Katelyn and I will do our best to monitor questions that are coming in through the Q&A and the chat boxes. Um, and if we don't get to your questions, we'll try to find ways that we can continue this conversation going forward beyond today's live presentation. Yeah, so let's dive right in.
Awesome. I guess the first question that's on everybody's mind is how has COVID-19, obviously the pandemic, impacted your work online, whether that be the work that you were already doing online, how has that been changed due to the pandemic, or how has the translation of in-person programming to online impacted your work? And more specifically, how have you ensured ongoing participation and engagement, given that a lot of youth have been feeling increased, disinterest or apathy towards the things that they do or the things that they previously were passionate about? Any of you guys can kick it off.
Well, for Ability Online or myability.ca, we have seen an exponential increase in activity because of COVID. So compared to last year, activity on our site is up over 500% with 9 times growth in membership. And, how we're trying to help people be connected. The nice thing is our platform is open 24/7. So people can pop in and reach out and get that connection at any time. It's not time sensitive, which is good because we do have members coming from right across the country. And we have wonderful volunteers and mentors on the site who are there to kickstart conversations, to do wellness check-ins, to reach out. And then our chat night is also really popular on Monday nights. It's just a great opportunity for people to have something to look forward to at the same time every week so that they feel connected.
For Next Gen Men, we've been tremendously impacted, obviously, because every single thing we did was in-person facilitation. So it was really definitely going back to the drawing board. In the spring, we piloted an adaptation of our youth program through Zoom. Didn't love it. It was fine, but I kind of had this sense that like adolescents don't need to be told to be in a specific place in a specific time any more than they already are. And we headed into the summer at that point. So we decided to give Discord a try and head in that direction and see what it looked like to create an online community where boys can jump in and jump out as their, availability and interest sort of comes and goes. And so we did that over the summer, and we're still doing that now. It's called Next Gen Men Boys Club, and it's been a really neat experience to leverage Discord in a meaningful way and put a lot of work into sort of building that structure for young people to connect and get support. In terms of like the disinterest and the Zoom fatigue and the screen fatigue and that kind of thing, there's been sort of an intention for us in designing our programs to meet them with what they need and what they want. So it's sort of a mix between being like, here's an idea that I have and I'm interested to see if you're interested or to say, what are you guys interested in doing? So I can talk a little bit more about that later. An example would be we have this discussion activity that's more thoughtful and reflective, and the last couple of weeks haven't had as many boys participating in that. And so we were able to get a partnership where we had like a YouTube gamer join the conversation, and that sort of bumped up participation because boys were interested in having that conversation and making that connection with the I don't know if you call that like a celebrity these days, but yeah, it was a cool opportunity. The overarching thing that I would say is that like, while everything has changed, the one thing that hasn't is the relational aspect of youth programming. That's a critical part of how Next Gen Men operates, is to build connections with the participants, both with the facilitator and the participants and among the participants, to say that if you're going to show up to this program, like in part, you're going to do that because you care about the people that are here with you. And that hasn't changed, and that's still been a big part of what we do. And so thinking critically about how are we building connection through a screen, through this online community, I'd say has been a big part of the adaptation. Because it's easier said than done, to build connection through the internet, but it is possible, and it's something that we've been working very hard to do.
Yeah, I think I'll just echo what Jonathan just said. Our programs have definitely been impacted, but I'll speak from a provincial program perspective. Both of our programs have been kind of designed to be online, like especially PYP because it is a provincial reach. But they were designed to be like mostly online, but with a couple of in-person retreats. And based on last year's PYP, it's like those retreats that actually really create the foundation of those relationships. And so while 2S LGBTQ youth, of course, they want to be part of these programs and create these projects and engage with their community in that way. But a huge part of it is actually wanting to build relationships with other 2S LGBTQ youth throughout the province or within their region. So it has been difficult. We have had to, we obviously haven't been able to do retreats. So we are continuously trying to find ways to exactly what Jonathan said, like create community and create relationships online, which is much more difficult than doing them to do that in person and to share space over like, a 3 or 4 day retreat. So for many of our youth that are coming to these programs, like it's, especially with PYEP, when folks are coming from more isolated regions, from northern regions, it can be like their first time ever being in a space or even meeting another 2S LGBTQ young person. So yeah, like replicating those spaces online has been incredibly difficult, and it's kind of been like a trial and error. Like we're just like constantly trying new things. I think our organization is unique too because our entire org is led by 2S LGBTQ youth. We only have one staff person that is over 29, and everyone else is younger folks. So yeah, we're just like constantly trying to engage with our volunteers and with our staff to try to figure out what's going to work for folks. And I can talk a bit about that later too, of just trying to create space online and create community online. Yeah.
We at YouthREX, we hosted, some folks joining us today might know this, but we hosted a sort of series of conversations from July through September with different youth programs around how they were, responding to this time. And every youth program was talking about the challenges of having to change their approach to engaging and working with young people, and the shift to online. And I'm curious because I think, Michelle, like the platform that you use with Ability Online is an online platform. It is an online program in a sense. And Hayley and Jonathan, I'm wondering how much were you doing in terms of online community building before? And the other question I'm thinking of is around the platforms you choose to use and why, and how are you responding to that accessibility question? I think these are kind of connected, sort of like, what were you doing online before? And Michelle, you referenced how much the usage of the platform has increased as a result of COVID, but maybe why you chose the platforms you did, how much you were doing before versus now, but then also the accessibility question, because a lot of folks have asked questions around how are you ensuring that the young people with whom you work have access to a device that they can use, to a space where they have privacy, where they can engage, or even a secure internet connection, depending on where a young person might be located. Those might be considerations. So I know that's a lot. I'm just wondering if you can share from your perspective some of your thoughts on how those pieces might connect.
Well, for us, we like everything we do has always been online, but we've always maintained a text-based platform so that it is fully accessible to every type of technology and adaptive technology that people are using, so that there isn't any exclusion, and a lot of our members might look different or walk or talk differently than others, and so by maintaining that text-based environment, even though there's the video option nowadays, we're not putting anybody in that situation of feeling awkward or that people are staring at them. Just removing some of those social barriers has been really key. It's also meant that if you don't have like strong internet connections, because it's not, video streaming or lots of graphics or that type of thing, it again makes it easier for individuals to access. We're also now, the new platform's completely mobile friendly, so people can do it from their cell phone. And again, because you're not streaming video or what have you, you're not using up bandwidth. So you're not, drawing on your data. And that's made a huge difference for a lot of individuals who don't have great technology. Most people have access to smartphones nowadays. But you know, when we started 30 years ago, we actually donated computers to centers so that individuals could get online. So we try to be creative in our ways of finding opportunities. I work with schools to get kids online who, when they are in class, where they have access to iPads or computers, that at the very least they can connect to their peers at that time.
So in terms of the tech that we use, I like during COVID and pre-COVID, we just try to use the tech that youth are already using, which feels pretty easy because again, our entire staff team is youth. So what that's looked like is a lot of social media usage, to be honest, a lot of texting. And you know, when doing like videos and things like that, we've used a range of things. We've, you know, used Skype, we've used Zoom, we've used you know, like Facebook, FaceTime, whatever is working for youth, that's what we'll use. And depending on each cohort of youth volunteers, we check in with them and be like, what platform are you already using? What are you comfortable using? What do you have access to? So I'll say, you know, for Youth Organized, that's just starting our cohort right now, they're using Discord because that's the platform that youth are already accessing. So great, that's what you want to use, then we're on board. So we really do try to take that like youth-based approach, whatever they're already using, whatever they're comfortable with, let's do it. If they want to learn a new technology, let's do it. It's led by them. And in terms of access, something we're trying really hard as an organization to do is creating like access funds throughout all of our programs. So knowing that many youth do not have access to certain things like, you know, regular access to internet, to a cell phone, to maybe they can't participate in programs because they need funds for childcare, maybe they need food. Like honestly, that's a huge thing because we have moved from when we were doing a lot of in-person programming, there was always food. We always made sure that there was food. And now that we're in an online space, it's kind of like that element has kind of been taken away because it's a lot more expensive to send all of your youth volunteers like gift cards for food than it was to buy a couple of pizzas or whatever you're buying in an in-person setting. So that's another thing we've been trying to do is like offer food as much as we possibly can. As an organization with like a smaller budget, it can be difficult, but it's something we're trying to build into all of our programs now. So what that looks like when staff or volunteers join Youthline, like that's the first thing that happens is like a one-on-one check-in with whoever is their, you know, their like volunteer coordinator or their manager. To have a conversation about what are your access needs, what can we support with, and we give them those examples because I think for a lot of folks too, this might be the first time they're being asked that. So we give those examples and say that we have these funds to be able to support them to make sure that they can actually participate in our programs. So that's something that we're trying to do across the board currently, and that's not just like when they first join, but that's ongoing throughout their time at Youthline. And so we also do try to do things like, you know, emergency COVID response funds where folks that are internal to Youthline, including our volunteers, can like access funding for emergencies that are happening in their lives. So yeah, like access needs is something that we definitely are prioritizing and like continuously learning about, especially in the context of COVID. And what it comes down to is making sure allocating money for that, like really allocating money to be able to support youth and accessing programs.
No, my end, similarly, Discord is that came from youth. So we had this sense of like, we're building something totally new. We're building something that's meant for young people. And so we included young people in those conversations. I like rounded up these like little focus groups of young guys that I knew and said like, this is what we have in mind. We're talking like, it could be Instagram, email, phone calls, Slack, Discord, like there's any possibility. And they all said, if you want to have a community of young people, Discord's the place to go. And that's what we did, you know. And another cool thing about Discord is that it's got a lot of built-in accessibility features like text to speech and that kind of thing, and you can change the font size and all that kind of thing to make it accessible to your needs. And yeah, in terms of like accessibility, I mean, because Michelle kind of said, like the bottom line is like to access these services, you need the internet. And that's actually not everybody. And you need a device. And that's also not everybody, especially not every young person. And yeah, at least where we are right now, we're pretty limited in our ability to impact those kinds of facts. It's just a reality that it's actually not accessible to everybody as much as we wish it could be. We do our best to sort of improve or ensure accessibility by offering spaces for free and offering spaces through partner organizations. But in terms of doing that kind of on the ground, like you need a device to access this, that's a little bit out of our reach. I think that answers the question, but I kind of got distracted, but I'll leave it at that.
No, it's great to hear how you guys have been adapting, and specifically, I love the fact that all three of your organizations ensure that youth feedback and like suggestions are taken very seriously and are directly implemented in response to them suggesting it. So I think that's super important, because I also think that that's the way you get greater buy-in and engagement from the youth, because if you're actually taking their suggestions, then it leads to better outcomes. So that's great. I think the next question that we were thinking about is, given that you're moving online, right? Online has a bunch of like security issues. Sometimes there's also privacy issues. There's the challenge of sometimes youth not having like safe spaces even in their own home to be able to, participate in even like video conferencing. I think text-based services are a little bit easier to participate in that sense. But if you wanted to facilitate, Discord voice chats or like Zoom calls, how are you able to ensure safety in terms of that privacy and confidentiality, especially on some platforms that have had security issues? Or beyond that, also, and how do you ensure like a safe and welcoming and inclusive space, and really building trust for youth to feel comfortable, being vulnerable and expressing themselves or expressing concerns or the fact that they're not feeling so happy right now, and those sort of things?
I'll jump back in and say that, yeah, that was like one of our primary concerns in building this sort of structure, is how can we ensure the safety of young people online? That's something that's really important to us. And so the sign up process, like the registration process, involves like a verification where I talk to the young person on the phone or on a video call, just to like hear their voice and make sure they're not a total stranger seeking to exploit the space. And that's been pretty effective. It's and I sort of the server is this. I've put a lot of work into sort of locking down the server, so you can, if you're a young person, you get access to the code and you're interested in joining the server, you can get to like the edge of it where you see like a couple of like welcome spaces. But getting beyond that space, I'm the gatekeeper, and you have to have a conversation with me before you get there. And I can provide more details about that, but I don't want to digress too much. But it's been effective to have me as that gatekeeper. Like I've had a couple of random accounts join, whether they are young people that were confused or like actually like trolls. I don't totally know, but I've been able to sort of engage them in conversation, and then they usually like dip, and I'm like, okay, well, good job me for protecting the young people in this space. And so that's the safety aspect of just being online itself. There's also the safety aspect of youth programming in terms of, bullying and vulnerability. And obviously cyberbullying is sometimes different in that it's like a little more under the radar, sometimes harder to detect. So we have direct messaging lockdown unless people add each other as friends, which can help prevent like unwanted private communication. And all the other spaces I can see, and I take a lot of time among the other work that I do to watch those spaces and to moderate those conversations. And then the other thing to mention is that we have rules that the boys that, again, I had a focus group of boys in the summer saying, what are you interested in establishing for the group norms and how we can make this a safe and enjoyable place for everybody? And I help the boys sort of stay accountable to those rules, and those rules are related to respect, being appropriate, and I think just sort of not tearing each other down. Safe, inclusive. Yeah, and then I guess one more thing to mention is I had this cool learning opportunity at the start of the summer where typically I've framed our programs as for male identified youth, trying to encompass, non-cisgender and all different sort of the ways that people identify masculinity and their gender identities. And I had somebody say, you know what, like who's identifying male? And that was an interesting, moment for me. And they also were pointing out that we weren't as explicit or public about that inclusiveness as we could be. And so I sort of did a bit of thinking and reflecting, and now I say our programs are for youth who identify as male. And I try to be really explicit about, or not explicit, but really visible about our inclusiveness and commitment to supporting non-cis, non-straight youth, and making sure that this is a safe and inclusive and a supportive space for those people as well.
Yeah, we do a lot of the same things, Jonathan, in terms of the screening. So people, I'm also the gatekeeper. When people sign up and join, yep, there's a 2-level process. They do put in their real name information. I verify through phone call. Once they get approved, so they can't do anything until I actually approve them. Then once they're inside the platform, they create a display name, which protects their identity. But they use their first name so that there is some relationship building. And then I have police screen trained volunteers on the inside who help monitor and moderate the message areas to make sure everybody's being friendly and appropriate. We've set up topic areas, which helps guide the discussions so they can stay on topic. And there's lots of opportunity for the members to be able to report if they have anything inappropriate. We don't monitor people's private messages, but if somebody reports something that's inappropriate, we can then address it. And then we also have a program running in the background called Clean Speak, and it filters out inappropriate words. And we've done that because we are an all ages program as well. We do have kids and teens, and you know, profanity isn't bad if it's not directed negatively towards somebody. So we're not trying to censor what people are saying, but we're trying to make it respectful. And so that works really well. And then we also have just ongoing check-ins with people to make sure everyone's doing okay. And, you know, our number one rule is you don't have to like everybody on the site, but you do have to respect one another. And you set those guidelines and the parameters, and we've been incident-free for 30 years because of that.
Yeah, a lot of the same things on our end. I guess our programs are a bit different because they're not really like publicly accessible. So the folks that are on our platforms like Discord or, you know, our Facebook groups or chats, they're actually volunteers who have been accepted into our programs. So it's a bit different because it's not publicly available. If we do have public events, we do go through registration processes. Like, you know, for example, using Eventbrite and not sending out like a Zoom link and a password until a day before. So screening folks. So if there is publicly accessible events, we will go through like security measures to make sure that we can make it as safe as a place as possible. Yeah, and then I guess just going to the community guidelines, similar thing as both of the other panelists have said, it's like when folks join our programs for the first time, one of the first meetings as a group, actually the first meeting as a group is actually coming up with community guidelines. And again, that's like led by the youth volunteers. And that's, you know, a long conversation about what we are expecting from ourselves and each other to make this space a community space and as safe as possible for folks. So that's one of the things that we do. Another thing I'll say about security is whatever platform you're using, I would suggest just like looking into, you know, going on Google and looking into what are the privacy measures you can ensure? What are some other things that have happened to other organizations? And looking into how to prevent those things or how to increase like security settings or whatever that may look like do that preemptively instead of you know, like instead of just waiting until it happens to your org, because it is happening more and more. Do it preemptively. Look into all the research. If you're using a new platform, like, you know, spend a lot of time looking through security measures and how to make that a safe place for folks. So that's something that we've done extensively, especially in relation to platforms like Zoom, which we use regularly. So we do have like many documents and tips and guides and stuff for all of our coordinators and our volunteers to make sure that like security settings are high, and also a plan of what to do if something happens. So that's also part of that too, because we do have our youth volunteers who are like running events and running trainings and whatever else they might be doing. So making sure that folks have access to that information of like, you know, here's a document, but also let's chat. What happens if this happens? Like what is the plan in place? So really thinking through that before actually using those pieces of technology.
Yeah, for sure. Light also primarily uses Zoom. And something that I think has been important to us also in terms of the inclusivity and making sure it's like a comfortable space for our youth participating is that during our bi-weekly fellowship training sessions, we don't actually require our youth to turn on their cameras. We encourage it because we love seeing their beautiful faces. And I also do think it increases bonding when you're able to see each other and chat face to face, but we don't mandate it because we do know that that is definitely something that sometimes people don't feel comfortable, showing their room potentially. They might not be able to feel comfortable turning on their camera. They might not even have the technology to do so. So that is something that we don't mandate to kind of help ensure that there's a welcoming space there. In terms of your, translation of your services online, or just like the continued use of them, what has surprised you about the way youth have used your platforms, and how have you prioritized connecting youth who might be experiencing isolation? So like what unexpected things have happened there? Like what maybe successes or challenges have you experienced in terms of your online use of platforms?
Yeah, I'll jump back in. And I guess something, I don't know if I'd say this is surprising, but I'll say something surprising or impactful has been how interested youth are in co-creating an online space. I'm constantly asking for advice and feedback, and and getting sort of tips well, yeah, that's enough synonyms, but I'm getting advice on how to build the space. And I get that from the young people and in conversations with them. And they're interested in like getting leadership opportunities and moderating and welcoming new members and that kind of thing. So that stands out to me as something that's been kind of neat. And it's not something, it's something that we do when we do in-person programs, as we say, like what conversations and what topics and themes are you interested in doing? But to have that sort of translate into online spaces and sort of building the structure itself, like the youth don't really build the fact that after school programs exist, but they are definitely hand in hand with the idea of how to make space for each other on Discord, which has been really cool. In terms of youth who are isolated, yeah, there's a lot of I do a lot of one-on-one conversations, because we do have like a community space, but I also I'm checking in with young people online, and that's like a professional thing. It's also a personal thing. I have a lot of connections with kids, and yeah, it is not an easy year. It's not easy for me as like a young adult who's got a lot of support systems. And so so a lot of checking in and saying, hey, we haven't talked in a while. And like I had a kid, for example, join for Among Us and play Among Us, and I know this kid from a program that we ran in the spring, and so he played around and that kind of thing, and then shot me a text afterwards, and it turns out like he's been in the hospital. His grandfather died. He's been like experimenting with drugs. Like there's been a lot of stuff going on in his life. And so those sorts of games and that kind of thing, I guess, like keep the door open for those one-on-one conversations and ensuring that, youth know who they can reach out to if they need it.
Yeah, we've had some similar experiences in terms of letting the youth drive what happens in our platform, and it very much always comes from them and their ideas. But also by utilizing the university students in our young adult platform to help drive content. It is designed as a peer-to-peer platform. And so utilizing individuals who are in their 20s to connect with our members who are in their 20s, they're all on the same page in terms of interests and life experiences and what they're aware of compared to someone like myself who's not in her 20s anymore. And it's been important to make sure that they have a voice. And we always also look for opportunities to move our members from being members to becoming mentors and to engaging others and to take on those leadership opportunities. And our platform has always nurtured role models and mentors and given them an opportunity to have a voice. And that's been huge. And they've done background research and been instrumental in moving us in new directions and things that we've never considered doing in the past. And it's been wonderful to watch people grow and spread their wings because we're giving them an opportunity. And some of the creative ideas that people are coming up with, especially during COVID, I had one student who had vegetables sprouting in her fridge, and she turned it into a horticulture program and filmed it and put it on the site so that the other members could see, hey, you could turn this into a vegetable garden. So, just letting them run with those ideas has been really instrumental. And the other thing, again, like Jonathon, I make myself available to my members, so they will call, they'll email, they'll reach out to me when they need that extra hand holding. And I've had quite a few because of COVID who've, called me in tears, absolutely terrified that if they get COVID, are they going to get equitable treatment because of their disability? And it's been just so very important to be there when they need it, and putting those supports in place that are available at any point. And now I've always, well, for the last 12 years I've worked out of a home office, so I essentially work 7 days a week. But that's an important part of running an online community, is you have to be available for your members when they need you, and it's not a 9-to-5 type job.
Yeah, I think to answer your first question about if there was anything that surprised me about how youth are using online tech, and I don't think so. I don't think there's been any surprises. I will say again, it's just like, as a youth-based org, we just kind of follow the youth trends as to what technology they're using, and that's the tech that we try to use. So for example, more and more youth are on TikTok. So like following that lead and like getting a TikTok account and being able to, support youth through TikTok as one example of that. A conversation that I'm really interested in having, and so is Youthline as a whole, is just like how to support youth and how to do youth programming during COVID, not through like Zoom and online technologies. That's something that I'm kind of grappling with, because like that Zoom fatigue and like online tech, like that, folks are exhausted and we can't do in-person programming. Folks are really tired of like online programming. So what does that look like for folks? Yeah, so it's something I'm like constantly interested in having conversations with folks. So if anyone has any ways that they've been able to do that, and it's, whether or not it was successful, I'm just like intrigued on hearing how that works. And in terms of isolation, it's like, to us LGBTQ youth are already isolated. Like we did a provincial needs assessment last year through PYIP, and we had almost 1,200 youth respond. And that was like the main concern coming up for folks, is that folks are just isolated, and that was pre-COVID. So we know that that is compounded now because of COVID. So one of the things we really try to do as an organization amongst staff and volunteers is try to host spaces that are actually just for like hanging out and like nothing else. Like, it's not for programming, it's not for work, it's not to check in about how the program's going. It's literally just like, let's try to build community. So we've tried so many different ways to try to do that. So for example, like online escape rooms has been one, having games nights, having Netflix nights, having crafting nights where we send folks materials in advance and then we craft together. We've just had like just hangout nights where we just do like, like check-in questions and things like that. We've recently created a collaborative coloring book, which has been a lot of fun. So folks are just like creating their own coloring pages and putting it together. We do have like an internal mentorship network that we've started up this year, because we, like, our organization, we have around like at any given time between like 5 to 10-ish staff, but we have like close to 100 volunteers. So we do have like a pretty big network. So we do try to offer too is just mentorship opportunities where we're just like connecting folks, because we have a pretty big network over the last 26 years. So just really trying to connect folks with who they want to be connected with to try to reduce some of that isolation. We also do tons of mail out packages. That's become a new thing for us, where we're like constantly just like sending people stuff, fun things or things that they need, whatever that looks like. We're just like, here's some things that we want to send you that are nice. And again, but like making sure that's in like a consensual way. So it's checking in with folks, like, can you have like a rainbow flag in your house, for example, because a lot of our youth, they can't. So checking in around that. And then the last thing, just like a lot of one-on-one check-ins. So all of our volunteers, we make sure that like on a continuous basis, we're supporting them through one-on-one check-ins, checking in what their access needs are, checking on what's going on in their life and ways that we can support. So we're trying lots of trial and error, but we do have some things that have been working really well.
Yeah, Hayley, you kind of anticipated sort of a question that I was thinking of, and a question that folks have been asking around how are you creating opportunities for bonding and connection? Is it activity-based, or how are you having to think outside of the types of activities you might do in person? So I think you kind of answered that a little bit, because one of the things I think we've all been connecting around over the last several months is sort of what we lose by having to transition to online programming or online connection interaction. And I'm wondering what actually do we gain? There are clearly accessibility issues that we really need to be mindful of, but there's also an opportunity to maybe reach folks who you may not be able to connect with in person. So I'm thinking about the other side of that. Like I'm thinking about myself as a young person, the isolation that I experienced, and if I had been able to connect with folks online. I mean, I was a teenager in the 90s, so the internet and online spaces were more limited. But if I had been able to find those connections, it would have been really meaningful, I think, for me personally. So I'm thinking about, like, what are the opportunities that having to build community online provide? And then, I mean, Hayley, you kind of explored some of what you're doing in your programs in order to create opportunities for bonding and connection. But maybe Michelle and Jonathon, if you have anything to add on that piece, because folks have been asking, like, well, what do you do with young people once you do get them online? So thinking about opportunities that might exist, and then how you're leveraging those opportunities to build that connection and that bonding for young people.
Well, for us, the online platform has meant a world of difference for many of the individuals that I work with. I have members who are nonverbal, yet they can communicate in a text environment. So they're now included. Or individuals who have, might be deaf or hard of hearing, and they can't participate in these video calls. So they're excluded unless you have somebody doing ASL or an interpreter or a chat box open so that they can be part of at least some element of it. So, for me, this has always been the reality of breaking down a lot of social barriers, people who've been stigmatized because of how they look or walk or talk. Those barriers have been removed. And then the other big thing, the advantage of online is that if you live in remote communities or far apart, and there's nobody else who has the same disability or illness or health challenge or life interest, you can get those collective numbers together by bringing people from across the country together. And then you've got more of that critical mass of, and I, over the years, I can't tell you the number of times that kids have said to me, I didn't know there was anyone else like me out there. And that they have others that they can relate to. And the accessibility, social accessibility is so big. And a lot of people, when they think of accessibility, they think about physical accessibility, having ramps and door openers and braille buttons and everything else. But very few people think about social accessibility, because all the ramps in the world are not going to make somebody feel welcome if, when they come into that building, they're stared at or an inappropriate comment is made. And so social accessibility for me is huge. And our online environment, because of the text-based nature, really ensures that happens. And then having just like-minded people who are caring and nurturing. When you create an atmosphere of positivity, it breeds positivity. It's like when you smile at somebody, they smile back at you. It spreads. Same thing. We practice giving out kind compliments. We've even started a forum on the platform called Random Acts of Kindness, and it's to call out other members and the nice things they've done. So members are acknowledging other members and volunteers and students who've said a kind word or done something nice for somebody else. And it's just constantly, we're patting each other on the back, and that really spreads. And you give youth an opportunity to celebrate their uniqueness and be welcomed and nurtured. And it really does spin off from there.
Yeah, some quick things from me. Like, I kind of resonate with what Michelle said. Is like it's tough, and it's draining. But on the other hand, we do have the entire internet between us, and that offers some unique opportunities. So on my end, like, we've seen a lot of use of Minecraft, Among Us, I don't know if you've heard of like IO games, those kinds of things. We've had Dungeons and Dragons happening using a Discord bot to roll the dice, and we've had Netflix parties and watched entire TV shows together. So there's been different, we've had like short film festivals, like we've done a bunch of different things using the internet. And I think something that's worth sharing is that like sometimes things completely fail. Like I've had ideas where I had the idea once, I think like card tricks are really cool. And I had the idea once during the summer, like, I wonder how hard it would be to teach card tricks, like magic tricks over a video call. Turns out it's next to impossible. So sometimes things don't work. Sometimes kids just aren't interested. But yeah, there's been a lot of like cool opportunities that have arisen. But you have to be brave to try the things to find out what works and what doesn't, and be okay with failing, which I am.
Just to build on that, one of our attendees had asked a question around, how are you communicating with your funders if that's something that you have to do around these changes or these adaptations to programming. So, coming from YouthREX, I'm wondering, are you evaluating the changes that you've made? How might you be doing that? Like, what are you looking to capture? How are you, maybe the broader question is actually, how are you defining success?
It's interesting. We the developers who've done our new platform for us have really done an amazing job at creating a behind the scenes algorithm that looks at the number of messages the person posts, the number of times they go in a chat room, the number of journey posts that they make, the number of logins. And then it takes all of those statistics and gives them an engagement level. So when you first start, you're a viewer, and then you can work your way up to being super. And I was just actually talking with a funder on Monday, and we were talking about those levels of engagement. And the true sign of success, they were saying, is when you move somebody from being a member of your community to being a person who wants to give back to the community. So when a member becomes a volunteer or a mentor, if you can shift somebody from that experience and have that kind of an impact on them where they want to give back to your community because of what you've given to them, that's what they look at as a true sign of success. And so we're utilizing some of that, but the new data that we're getting, we look at page views and logins and the amount of time spent on site and bounce rates, all of those measures you can get through Google Analytics and what have you. And so we have those built in, because you're right, funders do want the quantitative information, but we also use our stories as a way of proving to funders the impact that we have on our members. When the member testimonials, that the feedback they give us about their experience on our platform.
Yeah, on my end, we have not been leveraging that much quantitative data. It is kind of, well, I don't know what adjective to give it, but like maybe frustrating that the nonprofit sector relies so significantly on quantitative data to justify and, prove the efficacy of programs. Because so often the efficacy is in like a single story, and how do you measure like transformation in a young person's life? Like that's not a number, that's a person. And so yeah, I mean, I've heard lots of stories, and I've like seen firsthand the impact of having a space where a kid belongs, or having an opportunity to shine at something or share a passion, or learn a new skill. Like those have been really meaningful experiences. They're not easy experiences to quantify. So I don't think we've totally been, worrying about how exactly to measure right now, apart from just like those relational aspects of knowing the impact that we're having on our participants.
Yeah, same, I think. It's hard. Like we do the typical things around, like if we have like a training or a social or whatever, folks are receiving like feedback forms. Whether or not they fill it out is like up to them really. But like measuring success it's hard. That's a hard thing to quantify. Like for us, like success is literally just like a youth person feeling loved, cared for, supported, feeling like they have access to a space even if they don't show up. creating like collaborative opportunities, like things like zines and stuff like that have been really cool. But yeah, it's hard to like quantify what success would look like and how to pass that along to funders. I think in our reporting, we do let them know, like, these are how the things have changed. These are the things that we're trying out. These are the things that worked, and like things that have gone well versus like lessons learned. So we do document all that. But yeah, I think going back to like the idea of like quantitative, like the idea that a program is just successful based on how many folks are part of it is like not really how we measure success. It really comes down to individuals, and it can be hard to share those two as well, because we don't want to, like those stories are like private, and those stories are confidential, and we don't want to put that on display for like the rest of like this cis het world, basically. So it feels complicated. But yeah, we know when things are working because we have relationships with the youth that we're working with, and also we're the youth. So it's hard to answer that question. Hopefully that helps a bit.
I think that we would affirm that, that you and the young people with whom you work need to define what success looks like, and that those are the stories that you need to tell in a way, obviously, that is respectful and inclusive, and obviously, respecting people's privacy, their confidentiality, and we have a lot of tools at YouthREX to help folks with that piece, and kind of breaking down or demystifying evaluation, and trying to work with programs so that they're telling the stories of impact to their funders in a way that meets the funders' needs, but that also really is a reflection of the work that you all are doing. So I just wanted to share that because that is a resource to the sector, and we affirm that what is working, and and that's important it's important to draw that out.
Yeah, similarly to you guys at Light, we also really like feedback forms, and like also we do focus groups at the end of the year when we ask our youth how they enjoyed the programming and like what they got out of it, like what the value that they think that they got, or if they enjoyed it or if they don't. So we do like monthly evaluations where they like optionally are able to opt into like feedback forms and tell us like what they've been liking, what they don't like, what they want us to do more of, etc. I think another thing that also could help in terms of getting like quantitative data, this isn't quite quantitative, I guess, but the Students' Commission of Canada helps us with our evaluations. So us as youth are allowed to pick the metrics that we think are important, that we want to ensure that we achieve by the end of the year. So this can look like engagement with community, civic participation, ability to advocate and express your opinions. So what they do is they put together these surveys for us, which have these sort of metrics like, I feel safe expressing my opinion, or like, the program facilitators make me feel welcome in this community. Like I feel included online. And it's like a Likert scale. So like I strongly disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree. And we use those surveys to try to see like before and after time points to see if there was any hopefully increase in like the way that the youth were feeling and the things that they have been experiencing. So hopefully there's been a positive impact there, and that's what we use. I don't know if that counts as quantitative, but I feel like it's semi-quantitative, semi-qualitative. So yeah. So it's been really interesting to hear all of the tools that you guys use. I love that Ability Online has their own platform in and of itself to be able to facilitate interaction, and Jonathon has been using Discord. We were wondering how you are able to use social media to enhance your reach, because obviously youth are using a lot of social media, particularly TikTok and Instagram. So what tools perhaps on those platforms, or just in general using social media, have you been able to utilize to reach more youth and to improve engagement or to support your online community building efforts?
Next Gen Men is a really small team, and we do have social media, but in terms of like the youth focused outreach through social media, I'd say that's pretty limited, because like I'm spending most of my time developing and doing other sort of email based communication with parents and with schools, and then just delivering the program itself. So I don't totally have the capacity for that as the person in charge of youth programming. I'd say what it does look like for me is personal communication. I know a lot of young people through the different like volunteer summer camp, education, different like places that I have a role or a place to connect. And so I keep those relationships alive. And so when when there's an opportunity or when, it's a good moment to check in, then I do and extend the invitation to different things. So I do personal social media, and that's not really like announcing things so much as just having, direct messaging going on. So I do that on a personal level, but organizationally, it's pretty limited. Wish it wasn't, but it is what it is.
I have to agree with you, Jonathan. When you're busy trying to manage the program itself and the members and supporting them, there's not a lot of time left over for spending time on social media. And for me in particular, and it may be just the target audience that we're reaching out to, we're actually more effective in finding new members and building our youth base by linking with our community partners. And so, like, schools, hospitals, rehabilitation centers, disability associations, that type of thing. So we actually get more engagement through social media through those partners, as opposed to getting the youth themselves coming to us by way of social media. But we do use our Instagram to share details of what's going on the platform. So we used it to announce the new platform that we've just launched. We use it to talk about Giving Tuesday that's coming up for making donations. But we're not, doing active recruitment through those channels. We should probably do more, but there's only so much of you to go around to manage all of the different communication points.
We do use social media quite a bit for like that. I think that's our main method of recruitment for all of our programs. Something we found really helpful both on Facebook and Instagram is using paid targeted ads for lots of folks for like different programs that are happening, different events that are happening, especially in regions that we don't have relationships that are that built up. So thinking specifically about more like rural and northern remote communities. So we will use targeted ads. And another way we use social media too is like as a way to support to us LGBTQ youth. So we do share a lot of like affirmational content, supportive content, constantly promoting our support line for youth to be able to access. So we do use it quite a bit. Something we do want to use more is just like Facebook and Instagram live features, because we're noticing too, it's like one thing to like schedule an event and have folks register, but we're seeing all these other amazing organizations who are using live functions. And then it's really cool because folks don't have to register. You can just watch during that time, or you can go back and watch it afterwards. So it does feel a bit more informal and like a pretty solid way to be able to reach youth without making like, an event and a registration process and stuff. So sometimes that can be easier too. So we are hoping to use that a bit more in the future.
Yeah, thank you. That sort of touched on because we were interested in like the social media platforms that you use, and I think a lot of youth workers are wondering like where do we go to connect with young people? And I think earlier you said like ask young people where they are and where they are hanging out online, what tools they're using, what tools they're comfortable with. Connect with other youth programs. Obviously, like you all have so much to share about the experiences that you've had, before the pandemic and how you've had to adapt since, and also the other ways that you're conducting outreach, because traditional outreach models might not work given that programs that were happening in person might have relied on in-person outreach, and so looking to community partners, schools, targeting ads, in online spaces where young people are, like these are all really, really important strategies. I'm wondering just, personally, I'm wondering how, and Katelyn, this is a question for you as well, I think, like, how do you maintain boundaries and how do you manage burnout? Michelle, you said, you're working 7 days a week. If you're supporting an online community of young people, you need to be available and accessible. How are you navigating that? Because I know, like a lot of folks, I'm very grateful to be someone who's able to work from home during this time. But yeah, the boundaries, like I'm broadcasting today from my living room, inviting all of you in. So like, how are you negotiating that? How are you negotiating boundaries and potentially, burnout? And again, like we're all sort of in this and struggling with some of these questions. So there's certainly no right or wrong way to approach that. But I'm wondering if you feel comfortable sharing what you might have found in your role as folks who are working with young people and supporting young people and young people yourselves.
Well, for me, with the boundary issue, I treat it more as a flex schedule. So what I really like is, you know, in a given day, if I have, well, more, not so much these days, but if you have a medical appointment, you have something to do outside, or I just feel like going and baking some cookies or something, I can take an hour off in the middle of the day because I know I'm going to make it up somewhere else. So I actually love the fact that I have a flex schedule, or if I'm not feeling well, or, you know, you can wear your track pants to work and just totally pamper yourself that way. You know, but the other thing I honestly, and I say this from my heart and truthfully, that the members that I work with, the youth that I work with, give it back tenfold. And I could be having the worst day and I log in, or we have our chat night on Monday night, and inevitably I come away feeling uplifted and validated myself because I feel that impact that I'm having on the youth that are coming to our platform. And like I said, they are so grateful. I get spontaneous thank yous and messages of, I don't know what I would do without this. And that's what drives me and keeps me going, because there's nothing more rewarding than the gratitude from the people that you're helping.
I love that. That is super cool to hear. I definitely resonate with the flex schedule. So often I'm working in the evenings, and I'll take time during the day. But I just to head in a different direction, like I don't feel uplifted. I feel really drained. I find it really hard to be on the computer all day, especially because I thrive so much from in-person connection. So I'm having a really tough time in the midst of the pandemic, specifically as things have become more restricted in the last couple of weeks. That's been really getting me down, because I had been working towards like in-person youth volunteer stuff in my community that I just moved to, and now all those are getting canceled. And so I've been really disheartened. So I mean, yeah, it is meaningful work and I'm passionate about, you know, the kids that I work with, but like doing stuff just through the screen all the time, like by the time I kick it at like 6 or 7 p.m., the last thing I want to do is like go back to the screen. So what, you know, to answer your question, I do have pretty strict boundaries. Like once I'm off, like I'm off, and I'll be back tomorrow. I'm not on the weekends, just because, yeah, I need that time to get off the screen and to recharge by going outside, and mountain biking or skiing and that kind of thing. Um, so yeah, like the burnout is, I think, critical. Like I think, I'm really glad you asked that, because yeah, it's something that I've been seeing, and definitely something that I've been experiencing, is like being really careful to take time off and to, you know, change things in my life to try to mitigate how much more difficult this is for me. Um, on the other hand, I'll end with a bright note, which is I used to do a lot of commuting from school to school to school, and now I save a lot of time not in the car. So not everything's not, you know, grim and terrible, but yeah, it has been challenging, and it's been something. Burnout has been something to watch and to identify. Um, Specifically.
Yeah, quickly echoing the flex schedule, all of us at the Youth Line team, like we've never, even before COVID, we've never had the typical 9 to 5 schedule because our programming is with youth. So it's basically whenever, like most youth are available and eager to do programming in the evening. So lots of folks that are supporting volunteers are working in the evening and flexing their schedule throughout the day based on the needs of volunteers. But yes, burnout is real. That is definitely something that is on our radar as well, because again, it's to us LGBTQ youth that are working to support to us LGBTQ youth in a volunteer capacity, who are then supporting to us LGBTQ youth who aren't even part of the Youth Line organization. So it's like, that is something that we do have regular conversations about, and having conversations about boundaries too. So just like the lessons that we've learned even over the last 6 months. So for example, if we are doing, you know, lots of communication over Facebook or Instagram, we actually have our coordinators and our assistants make like separate accounts, so it's not attached to their personal account, because we've been there, and that can be very exhausting and doesn't really leave a lot of space for boundaries when it's so closely attached to like your personal social media. Another example of that is like we do a lot of texting with our youth volunteers. So, you know, unfortunately, we don't have the funding to be able to provide everyone with new cell phones. We actually just use an app that has a separate phone number, so that, you know, when when the day is over, or when someone's taking a day off, or it's the weekend, or whatever the case may be, like they don't have to, they're not seeing those messages pop up unless they open the app. So just different like tips and tricks for implementing boundaries among staff, but also amongst volunteers. So like giving that space for volunteers to be like, what's your boundaries? When can I reach you? When like, you know, or you're having a bad week or month, like that's okay. Take a break from the program. It's totally fine. So that going both ways with boundaries too, with like staff, volunteers, and then just youth in the community as well.
Definitely, I think boundaries is an issue for me, especially because I'm a student at in university still, and I'm also trying to lead both L.I.G.H.T and Young Ontarians United. So actually, during the summer, like I actually felt like an incredible amount of exhaustion, and it got to the point where I spoke to my co-director and I was like, okay, you know what? I think we need to take a break because I feel like it is getting to the point where it's impeding my ability to work, and also I feel like be able to like both put value into the project and get value out of it, like to the point where you're so exhausted that you're no longer enjoying the work that you usually love. I think that starts to be an issue, right? So I think the way that I try to adapt now into the school year now, after having that kind of episode in the summer where I realized like I was just overworking myself too much and it was getting unsustainable, I think I've been trying to incorporate like exercise into my schedule and also like balancing it out with in-person interaction. So like I bubble with the people who live on my floor in residence, which is like 2 other girls. So like we also get to like, you know, have lunch together where we just aren't on the computer, which I think helps balance the time that I'm on the computer, because I'm pretty much on the computer 24/7 because my classes are online, my meetings are online, my programming is online. Like I almost exclusively don't do anything in person. So I think for me, prioritizing the limited in-person interaction that I have had is important, and also fostering, I think, a culture of like evaluating when you need to take a break. Like with me and my executives, we have these conversations very frequently about our mental health and by prioritizing like taking a break and evaluating when you need to do so. So I feel like from the beginning of the year, I made it very clear to them that if they are suffering from burnout, or if they're, you know, like everybody has off weeks when they can't do work, or they just something might have happened in their life, or something might have gotten in the way, that they don't have to feel like afraid of voicing that or like messaging me about it privately or just expressing that. So I think by like being vulnerable myself and having those conversations during meetings on regular basis, that has created like a culture of people being more comfortable about talking those sort of things, and also taking breaks when they need to for their mental health, or if something has happened in their life, because a lot of people are suffering with a lot of challenges, like, you know, deaths in the family, stress and anxiety because of the pandemic. So I think it's important to understand that even if they're not comfortable saying it, things could be happening that you don't know about. So that's what I would say about L.I.G.H.T. I think something else that I would be interested in hearing is that, especially considering the programming that L.I.G.H.T does, something we've been facing a challenge with is facilitating online discussions. So obviously for us, we have like specific training sessions where we want to talk about certain things like social justice issues, have conversations, or even just like during socials, like, you know, fostering that conversation. But people are like pretty shy sometimes, and I feel like sometimes breaking the ice is very difficult. So do you have any thoughts around best practices facilitating these sort of online discussions, trying to make things more engaging or exciting for youth? And I think specifically a question from the question box for Hayley is, what sort of themes or conversations would be beneficial for to us LGBTQ youth specifically?
Yeah, I was just typing out a response to that question too. So just thinking through, thanks for that question. It's a great one, especially within like a rural and remote context. Yeah, it's hard to do 2S LGBTQ plus programming. So I think one of the best experiences I've had, and I think Youth Line's had in general, in terms of creating community and like more isolated regions across Ontario, was actually some zines that we created. So collaborative zines. I know that zines are like very popular in like GTA culture, especially 2S LGBTQ culture, but in other regions throughout Ontario, like where I am, for example, in Owen Sound, like not a lot of folks have created zines before. So for individuals who don't know, it's like kind of like a self-published collaborative book type thing that people just can create in whatever format they want. So for example, last year, we created a collaborative zine to us LGBTQ youth across northern regions. So what we did, again, this was in person, but can easily be adapted to be online, where it's like we held 6 different workshops throughout Northern Ontario based on where our youth ambassadors were. So for example, we had one in Sioux Lookout, Thunder Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, Sudbury. So just different regions where our youth ambassadors were. And we had a facilitator come in and co-hosted by the youth ambassador around messages that they wanted to send to us LGBTQ youth across northern regions. So then they had that facilitated conversation. So then folks would get a little piece of paper and they would actually create their messaging, whether that be like a painting, whether that be scrapbooking, whether that be just text, whether that be like whatever they want to do, that's what they created. And we ended up having, I think, around like 55 submissions. And it really created community across northern regions. So folks that will probably never be able to get to meet in person, they're actually having messages from those folks and now have this great resource of like this 60-page document of just like supportive messages to us LGBTQ youth that are feeling isolated. So I can see that being very easily adapted online. Again, just thinking through access of making sure folks have those supplies to be able to make the zine, but it creates community and connection even when we're apart. So I feel like that's the best experience that I've had. And anyone that's looking to access that zine, like it's on our website. So youthline.ca under publications, anyone can access it and download it for free and print it if you want. So I'd say that, like, to answer that question more broadly, I think any conversations that's kind of bringing folks together. And I really do find that like affirmational type activities have been the most well received and needed, just like overall needed.
I would say that I got distracted by Hayley's answer and I forget the question.
Oh, I was wondering how you can facilitate online conversations using Zoom, or like how to, be engaging and, spark like diverse and dynamic conversations.
Cool. I was saying to one of the Q&As that Next Gen Men developed a resource for having conversations about positive masculinity, about mental health, friendships, relationships, and that kind of thing. And that's been a cool tool to sort of keep that thread of conversation. Because typically we would do like an activity, like an interactive experiential learning activity, and then debrief it. And so this is a way to sort of continue having those conversations when we're just doing voice to voice. And it's called Cards for Masculinity. Again, you can find it on the website. And some tips that I've learned is that it's actually really awkward to ask a question to a group of people, because then it's like, we've experienced this in the panel, like then who's answering, right? And so often I'll do like one-on-one and boys will listen to each other, and then I'll ask follow-up questions and you have to change the way you have a group conversation a little bit when you're having it online. But that's been, you can feel it, you can sense it a little bit, but it's definitely been a learning process of exactly how do you have conversations through Zoom. It's a little bit different, but I'd say that like targeting specific people so they know who's being asked. And then also letting them know to either let you know or whatever, if they don't want to answer, if they just want to listen. That's another thing that I always do with those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, there can be these sort of awkward moments where whether you're like in a live webinar or just in a meeting where you're sort of wanting to create space for people so that they can take their time and respond, but then folks who are watching might be just, what's happening? What's going on? Are they frozen? I know that happens a lot. Thank you all so much. I know, I'm aware of the time, and we committed to sharing space together until 12:30. So I don't know if you want to share like a closing thought, suggestion, tip, strategy, consideration. I think, on this topic, there were a lot of questions. I think we touched on a lot of the themes and a lot of the areas of focus that people were hoping for. I imagine there's a lot that we weren't able to get to. If you want to share your questions with info@youthrex.com, we can forward those to our guests today. You can connect with our guests as well. They are online. And so we encourage the conversation to continue. I mentioned before, we have an online platform that's designed for youth sector stakeholders where you might want to pick up some of these threads. But yeah, just giving everyone a chance for a final thought as we come to the end of our time together. I don't want to call anyone out, but so I'll leave it for someone to jump in.
I was just going to say thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to talk about what it is that we're doing and our experiences collectively. I know I always come away learning from others and getting ideas and feel validated, you know, when someone else is doing something very similar, which is a great opportunity. But for any of the audience out there and even the other panelists, our community is all inclusive and we welcome anyone who wants to come and check it out. And something else that we're offering is, because it is a big undertaking to try and create these platforms, we are working with our community partners to share space. So there is an opportunity on our partner platform that's launching in the next couple weeks. So it's just a segment of our platform where you can have your own private forum to communicate with your members or your clients or the youth that you're working with.
My closing thought is just that this is like critical work. I don't know, it's like a little bit cheesy to say like more important now than ever, but like I really do sense a lot of stress, tension, exhaustion, burnout, like isolation, all kinds of things that normally, you know, impact youth and present risk with youth. And it's just really important that there's folks on the panel, but also everybody in, you know, in the chat and wherever people might be listening to this, that we're doing impactful work in maintaining those connections with young people. It's not easy, but it is, yeah, it's crucial. So thank you, everybody. And thank you but yeah, I'll leave it there.
Echoing what everyone else has said, it's been great to have this conversation. They are like super important conversations right now, as youth programming always is, but also just to end by saying anyone wants to chat, particularly around 2S LGBTQ youth programming, and particularly in like rural and remote contexts, I'm like so down to have those conversations with folks. So my email's in the chat, and also just to land with like a shout out to the 2S LGBTQ youth and youth in general, Indigenous youth who are throughout Turtle Island and beyond defending land right now for all future generations. So yeah, just wanted to throw my support out there for those folks because oftentimes they're left out of conversations around youth work and youth programming, and just like encouraging all organizations and people to learn how you can support these movements, because they are fighting for not just Indigenous youth, but all of our youth, and are doing really, really incredibly important work and are being targeted with a lot of violence by the state. So just shout out particularly to the folks at 1492 Lineback Lane and the folks holding it down in Kitchener, and keeping those youth in your minds and finding ways to support them through your organization and personally.
Thank you so much for everybody for sharing all of your insights. I think that this has been extremely valuable to hear the strategies that all of your organizations have been doing. I love the approach and the approach and the mindset that you guys are using in your youth-oriented work. And I think it's really inspiring and it gives me hope for the future, even in this hopeless time that we have right now. So thank you all so much for your contributions.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Katelyn, for co-facilitating this conversation. And Hayley and Michelle and Jonathon, thank you so much for being with us, sharing space with us, sharing the challenges and successes you're facing professionally, personally. So much of what you shared resonated with me. We're really grateful for your time. And to everyone who was joining us today on Zoom and on Facebook, we really appreciate that you took the time. And we look forward to continuing this conversation because it is so critical, and other conversations with you, and how we can, support the work that you're all doing to improve youth well-being. And we appreciate you, and we look forward to keeping in touch. So take care, and we will see you all again soon, I hope. Thanks, everyone. Bye.